Pay attention to what your mind repeats every night when the day is over. Most people never look at this, but this is where financial stagnation is created or broken. Not during work, not in big decisions, not in ambitious plans. It happens when the body lies down, the lights go off, and the mind is left unattended. In that moment, the mind repeats. And what it repeats becomes a pattern. And patterns shape financial outcomes. Notice how this explains something you may have felt for years. You work, you try, you learn, you put in effort, and still money does not move the way it should. This is not a lack of ability. It is invisible repetition. It is mental confusion disguised as exhaustion. You finish the day tired, and your mind takes over without direction. Vague worries, bills looping in your head, silent comparisons. The feeling that you are always catching up. It does not feel like a decision, but it is. Understand this clearly. The mind does not default to clarity. It defaults to whatever has been repeated the most. And at night, when critical thinking is weaker, repetition becomes more powerful. That is why the same financial reality keeps returning, even when you swear you want something different. Before going any further, lock this in. Before continuing, write this in the comments right now. I will not fall asleep repeating scarcity. Do not skip this. This is not symbolic. Writing turns awareness into commitment. A written decision signals your mind that this pattern is no longer invisible. From this point on, you are no longer unconscious about what happens at night. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Now observe how most people end their day thinking about exactly what they do not want. Debt, delay, fear of not having enough, the feeling of never getting there. They do not do this because they choose to. They do it because they never chose otherwise. A mind without direction always falls back into the old pattern, and the old pattern is almost always scarcity. This is why financial stagnation feels so confusing. During the day, you try to be rational. At night, you undo everything by letting the mind drift. The closing state of the day matters more than the opening state. The last mental command is the one that stays. Pay attention to this mechanism. Sleep is not mental rest. Sleep is processing. Your subconscious works while you sleep, but it only works with the material you give it beforehand. If you feed it worry, it processes worry. If you feed it clarity, it processes clarity. Most people feed mental noise and expect clean results. This is where people misunderstand change. They think they need more motivation, more discipline, more pressure. That is wrong. Pressure fights the mind. Direction trains it. And the most strategic moment to train it is before sleep. Understand this without romanticizing it. We are not talking about positive thinking. We are talking about mental alignment, about choosing what your mind will rehearse while you are unconscious. The exercise is simple, but it is exact. Simplicity is what allows repetition, and repetition is what changes identity. Here is how this works in real life without turning it into a lesson. At night, before you sleep, you interrupt the automatic loop. You do not negotiate with old thoughts. You do not analyze them. You do not try to fix your life. You choose one short, grounded statement about your relationship with money that your mind can accept without resistance. Not a fantasy, not an exaggerated promise, a present tense direction. You repeat it calmly a few times, with attention, and then you stop. You close the day there. That closure is the ritual, not mystical, mechanical, structured repetition at the same time in the same way. Notice how this directly attacks mental confusion. Confusion exists because the mind is pulled in different directions. Closing the day with one clear direction reduces internal conflict. And when internal conflict drops, decision-making improves automatically the next day. This is why many people say, "I know what to do, but I can't stay consistent." They try during the day and undo everything at night. They open the day with intention and close it with fear, and the closing always wins. See how this also explains internal exhaustion. Exhaustion does not come only from work. It comes from mental friction, from wanting progress but rehearsing stagnation internally. When you close the day with direction instead of noise, that friction decreases. And when friction decreases, energy returns. This is the part almost no one notices. After a few nights of doing this, you start catching scarcity thoughts earlier in the day. Not because they increased, but because your awareness increased. This is not a problem. This is control returning. When you notice the pattern, it already has less power over you. Many people quit here. They think something is wrong because they are thinking about money more. In reality, they are seeing the pattern that has always been there. Awareness feels uncomfortable at first, but awareness is the beginning of authority. Authority over money does not come from forcing results. It comes from changing the internal reference point. Over time, this nightly repetition resets what feels normal to you financially, and your behavior follows what feels normal, not what you intellectually want. This is why financial change often looks quiet at first. You do not feel excited, you feel calmer, less rushed, more precise. That calm is not lack of ambition, it is reduced confusion, and reduced confusion leads to better decisions. If this insight is landing for you, understand something important. When you leave a like on this video, you tell the algorithm this is not noise. You help this reach people who are stuck in the same pattern without realizing it. This is not about supporting a video. It is about interrupting a collective habit of mental chaos that keeps people financially stagnant. Now notice the responsibility that comes with understanding this. Once you see how the night reinforces your financial reality, continuing to fall asleep on autopilot is no longer ignorance. It becomes a choice, and choices have consequences. Most people never change because they underestimate the power of simple actions repeated daily. They look for something complex, dramatic, or intense. The real adjustment is quiet, before sleep, every night, without negotiation. This is how mental confusion is replaced by direction. This is how financial stagnation starts to loosen its grip, not overnight, but inevitably. The mind follows what you train it to repeat. Notice how understanding alone never breaks financial stagnation. Most people stop right here. They agree. It sounds logical. It feels clear. There's that brief sense of relief. Now it makes sense. And still, nothing holds. Not because the method fails, but because they underestimate the force working against them. Silent repetition. Understanding does not rewire behavior. Conditioning does. Napoleon Hill taught that the human mind does not change through comprehension, it changes through conditioning. He said insight without repetition becomes temporary relief. That is why so many people consume content, books, videos, and courses and remain financially stuck. They understand, but they do not train. And money responds to training, not understanding. Lock this in before going any further. Before continuing, write this in the comments right now. I train consistency, not motivation. Do not skip this. This is not engagement. This is commitment. Writing this anchors your mind in a different rule. You are no longer relying on feeling ready. You are choosing repetition. And repetition is the only language the subconscious respects. Now observe how this connects directly to the ritual before sleep. If you do it one night and skip the next 3, the old mind wins. Not because it is stronger, but because it has volume. The subconscious does not care about intensity once. It obeys what is repeated. Hill emphasized this when he spoke about habit. What you repeat consistently becomes identity, and identity determines financial results. This is where most people sabotage themselves without realizing it. They treat consistency as optional. They expect results before the habit has time to solidify. They want to harvest before alignment is complete. Scripture confirms this principle plainly. Galatians 6:9. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap. The problem is not effort. The problem is quitting before the internal structure is built. Pay attention to how money exposes this brutally. Mental inconsistency becomes financial inconsistency. One day you decide, the next day you retreat. One day you commit, the next day you justify. This is not a character flaw. It is the absence of a stable internal pattern. And stability is created when the day ends the same way, every time. Napoleon Hill explained that the mind prefers routine because routine reduces conflict. When you establish a nightly ritual, you are not just thinking better, you are reducing internal friction. Less friction means more available energy. More available energy leads to clearer financial decisions the next day without forcing discipline. Jesus pointed to this same alignment when he said, Luke 16:10, "Whoever is faithful in very little is also faithful in much." The little here is not small money, it is the small habit, the moment that feels irrelevant. If you are not faithful in how you close the day, you will not be faithful when financial pressure increases. Now notice the common trap. Many people try to turn this exercise into something emotional. They want to feel inspired. They want intensity. They want a rush. And when they don't feel it, they stop. Napoleon Hill warned against this. He said the subconscious responds to calm repetition, not emotional spikes. Prosperity is not built on emotional highs. It is built on mental tracks. That is why the exercise must remain simple, almost boring at first. One short statement, one clear focus, one conscious closure, no negotiation, no drama. That simplicity is not weakness. It is what makes repetition possible, and repetition creates internal authority. Scripture reinforces this calm alignment when it says, Psalm 37:7, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him." Rest is not giving up. It is stopping the internal fight. It is alignment. When you close the day with direction, the mind actually rests, and a rested mind makes better decisions. Napoleon Hill taught that poor financial decisions are rarely caused by ignorance. They are caused by accumulated mental fatigue. When the mind is exhausted, it chooses the familiar path, even if it is destructive. The nightly ritual reduces this invisible fatigue. It removes unnecessary internal struggle. Notice how, over time, this changes your posture toward money. You begin noticing unnecessary expenses without effort. Old choices start to feel uncomfortable, not because of guilt, but because of misalignment. Your internal pattern has shifted, so the external behavior no longer fits. This discomfort is not a problem. It is progress. Very few people tolerate this initial discomfort. Most return to the old pattern because it feels familiar. Hill called this the return to the known. He taught that every real change includes a brief period of internal unfamiliarity. If you move through it, the new pattern stabilizes. Jesus described this process clearly. John 8:32, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Truth confronts before it liberates. When you start closing the day with direction, financial confusion resists at first. Then it weakens. Here is the point almost no one talks about. This ritual before sleep is not designed to attract money. It is designed to align identity, and financial identity determines how much you allow yourself to earn, keep, and multiply. Napoleon Hill taught that people never earn more than what feels internally safe. The ritual adjusts that safety threshold. Now observe the invisible consequence of skipping nights. Each night without conscious closure gives the old pattern another vote. It seems small, it accumulates. Prosperity is not blocked by one major mistake. It is kept away by repeated small concessions. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. This is why discipline beats motivation. This is why the night matters more than the morning. If this insight is clear to you, understand the responsibility it brings. When you leave a like on this video, you signal to the algorithm that this is not entertainment. You help this reach people who are paying the cost of inconsistency without seeing it. That signal matters. It pushes this message to people who still believe the problem is luck, timing, or opportunity, not training. Napoleon Hill repeated that most people live in the effect, not the cause. They want more money while keeping the same mind. The ritual before sleep works on the cause. And when the cause changes, the effect follows without force. Observe what actually sets your financial ceiling long before money ever reaches your hands. Most people think their financial results are defined by what they want to earn. That belief is wrong. Your financial reality is defined by what your mind feels safe maintaining, not what you desire, not what you aim for, what feels internally tolerable. Napoleon Hill taught that the subconscious operates like a thermostat. It constantly adjusts your external results to keep you within a familiar internal comfort zone. When you try to exceed that zone, something inside you pulls you back. This is why so many people experience financial peaks without permanence. They earn extra money, close a good deal, receive an opportunity, and months later they are back where they started. Hill explained that when the internal pattern does not change, the external result cannot last. Temporary gains collapse back to the internal set point. The ritual before sleep works exactly here. It recalibrates the mental thermostat. Before going deeper, anchor your attention. Before continuing, write this in the comments right now. I am raising my financial standard. Do not skip this. This is not a motivational phrase. It is a declaration of direction. Writing it signals to your mind that this ceiling is no longer acceptable. You are not forcing results. You are resetting tolerance. Now notice how different this is from positive thinking. Positive thinking tries to push the mind upward during the day. It fights resistance. The nightly ritual adjusts the internal level during rest. One struggles, the other realigns. Napoleon Hill taught that the subconscious accepts what is presented calmly, repeatedly, and without internal conflict. That is why night is strategic. Resistance is lower. Acceptance is higher. This explains why effort alone never breaks financial stagnation. You can work harder and still snap back. You can earn more and still lose it. The mind is not protecting your potential, it is protecting familiarity. And familiarity feels safe even when it is limiting. Scripture confirms this internal boundary when it says, Proverbs 4:23, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." Guarding is not defense against the outside world. It is control over what repeatedly enters. The heart here is not emotion. It is the automatic pattern center. If you do not guard this space at night, the old script fills it. Jesus addressed the same mechanism when he said, Luke 12:34, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Treasure is not just stored money, it is emotional focus. What your attention circles around becomes what your mind protects. If fear, lack, or insufficiency dominate your nights, those become the internal treasures your subconscious defends. Napoleon Hill taught that the mind works by association. If money is constantly associated with tension, worry, guilt, or pressure, your subconscious will naturally resist expansion. Not out of laziness, out of self-protection. The ritual before sleep begins breaking that association by replacing tension with direction. Pay attention to what happens after a few days of consistency. You begin noticing scarcity thoughts earlier in the day, not because they increased, but because awareness increased. Hill referred to this as awakening mental control. The moment you see the pattern, it loses absolute authority over you. This is a critical point where many quit. They think, "I'm thinking about money too much now." In reality, you are seeing what was already running unchecked. The difference is control. Before, you were carried. Now, you are steering. The Bible describes this internal adjustment precisely. Romans 12:2, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Renewal is not a sudden explosion. It is gradual replacement. The nightly ritual is exactly that, a quiet exchange repeated without spectacle. Napoleon Hill insisted that real change is rarely visible at first. It feels like calm, like clarity, like less urgency. This confuses people who believe prosperity should feel euphoric. Hill taught that when the mind enters order, money follows logically, not dramatically. Notice how this ritual also changes your relationship with time. Financially stuck people live with a constant sense of delay, always rushing, always behind, always owing life something. When you close the day with direction, that internal pressure begins to ease, and reduced internal urgency leads to smarter decisions. Jesus described this active rest when he said, Matthew 6:34, "Do not worry about tomorrow." This is not passivity. It is clarity. Those who do not close the day carry tomorrow's weight into sleep. Those who close it wake lighter. Mental lightness directly affects financial choices. Napoleon Hill taught that poor decisions are usually made under unnecessary internal pressure, not ignorance. Pressure. The ritual before sleep reduces that pressure. You do not wake up with answers. You wake up with less confusion, and less confusion is already a massive advantage. Few people maintain this long enough to feel the shift. Most abandon it when it starts challenging old beliefs. Changing financial identity creates discomfort. Hill called this resistance of the old self. It is the pattern trying to survive. Here is the key. You do not argue with this discomfort. You do not try to defeat it. You maintain the ritual every night. Simple, short, directed. Over time, discomfort becomes neutrality. Neutrality becomes the new comfort. This is how the thermostat resets. Scripture reinforces this principle of endurance when it says, Hebrews 10:36, "You need perseverance so that after you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised." Perseverance is not intensity. It is quiet continuity. Once this stabilizes, your financial behavior changes without conscious effort. You respect your money more. You tolerate less waste. You act with firmer boundaries. Not because someone told you to, but because your internal identity shifted. Napoleon Hill taught that money responds to identity with mathematical precision. It rises only to the level you recognize yourself capable of sustaining. The ritual before sleep adjusts exactly that, internal recognition. If this clarity landed for you, understand one thing. When you leave a like on this video, you help this reach people who are still fighting symptoms instead of correcting the internal limit. That signal tells the algorithm, this is not entertainment. It is mental retraining with real consequences. The ritual works because it changes what feels normal, and what feels normal always wins. Notice what actually changes when this ritual starts working for real. When this begins to take effect, it does more than shift how you relate to money. It changes how you stand in your own life. And this is exactly why so many people quit before consolidation. Not because it failed, but because it starts working too well for the old identity to remain comfortable. Napoleon Hill taught that every real change of level requires abandoning a former identity. He said no one reaches sustainable prosperity while trying to preserve the same way of thinking, reacting, and operating. The ritual before sleep is small in appearance, but deep in impact, because it acts precisely where identity is reinforced daily. Pay attention to what happens after some time. You start sleeping differently, not physically, but mentally. Less noise, less useless internal dialogue, less constant sense of owing something to life. This is not coincidence. It is evidence that the day is being closed with order. And internal order always comes before financial order. Scripture describes this alignment clearly. 1 Corinthians 14:33. God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. Constant mental confusion is not depth, it is misalignment. When the mind enters organized calm, decisions align naturally, and aligned decisions build prosperity. Jesus reinforced this same principle when he said, Matthew 7:24, "Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man." Notice the verb, practice, not hearing, not agreeing, not feeling inspired, repeating until it becomes foundation. The ritual before sleep is exactly that kind of silent practice. Napoleon Hill explained that the subconscious only accepts as identity what is practiced consistently. This is why, after a few weeks, something subtle but decisive happens. You are no longer trying to change your relationship with money. You are acting from a different internal position. And when action changes at the source, results change naturally. At this stage, many things begin to fall away. Old spending habits lose strength. Scarcity-based internal conversations start to feel foreign. Decisions that once felt heavy become obvious. Not because the world changed, but because the point from which you decide changed. Scripture confirms this effect when it says, Isaiah 26:3, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast." A steady mind is not a tense mind. It is a directed mind. A mind that knows how to close cycles, including the daily cycle. Napoleon Hill said true prosperity does not announce itself loudly. It organizes, it stabilizes, it repeats. The ritual before sleep does not create money out of nowhere. It creates an internal base capable of sustaining growth without self-sabotage. Now observe what this reveals about most people. Most live in reaction mode. They react to the day, to problems, to emotions. They never close the day intentionally. They never take control of the final thought. And because of that, they wake up in the same internal position every morning. You are no longer there, not because you are better, but because you chose to direct the mind where almost no one directs it. This is the separation point, not visible, not announced, but real. Once you understand this, continuing to consume shallow content stops making sense, because you realize real change demands continuous mental training, not scattered phrases. It demands direction, not temporary stimulation. This is also why the ritual must never become dramatic. Drama feeds the old identity. Precision builds the new one. The ritual stays short. It stays calm. It stays directed every night, without negotiation, without performance. Napoleon Hill taught that identity is not changed by intensity, but by repetition under low resistance. Night offers low resistance. That is why the ritual works when done there. You are not forcing growth. You are allowing alignment. Over time, you will notice something important. You stop arguing with reality. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop oscillating between hope and frustration. Instead, your posture becomes firm, quiet, directed. That posture changes how opportunities are perceived and how money is handled. This is where many misunderstand what is happening. They think they have become less ambitious. In truth, they have become less reactive. Ambition driven by confusion is unstable. Ambition driven by alignment is sustainable. Jesus spoke to this grounded posture when he said, Matthew 6:33, "Seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added to you." This is not about religion in abstraction, it is about order. When internal order is established first, external results follow. Napoleon Hill echoed this same idea in secular language. He said, "Success comes when effort aligns with identity. When identity shifts, effort becomes more effective without increasing force." At this point, the ritual no longer feels like a technique. It feels like a natural closing of the day. Skipping it starts to feel uncomfortable, not because of guilt, but because misalignment is now noticeable. That is how you know identity has shifted. Most people never reach this stage because they abandon the process when it challenges their old self. The old identity resists being replaced. Hill called this the battle between the old self and the new standard. The old self survives on chaos and inconsistency. The new one is built on direction. The solution is not confrontation, it is continuity. You do not argue with discomfort. You do not try to defeat it. You keep the ritual. Night after night, short, calm, directed. Discomfort fades into neutrality. Neutrality becomes the new comfort. That is how the internal standard is reset. Scripture reinforces this principle of endurance when it says, Hebrews 10:36, "You need perseverance so that after you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised." Perseverance is not emotional intensity. It is quiet continuation. Once this consolidates, financial behavior shifts without conscious effort. You respect your money more, you tolerate less waste, you act with firmer boundaries. Not because someone told you to, but because your internal leadership changed. Napoleon Hill taught that money responds to identity with mathematical precision. It rises only to the level you recognize yourself capable of sustaining. The ritual before sleep adjusts exactly that recognition. This is why the ritual does not end. It repeats, silently, daily, before sleep. Because identity is not built once. It is reinforced continuously. And if this level of clarity, direction, and mental leadership resonates with you, understand something important. If you want to keep training your mind at this level of direction and internal authority, this channel is where you belong. This is not motivation. This is structure. This is mental leadership built when no one is watching. The ritual does not finish. It continues. Every night,